Downton. I am the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the United Way of Central Ohio. Thank you all for joining us today. You know, for almost a century, United Way of Central Ohio has been committed to working side by side with all of you to build our community. And our specialty is to bring together donors, volunteers, advocates, nonprofits, and for-profit organizations, and leaders like all of you to take on Central Ohio's toughest and most challenging issues. You know, I also want to say just a bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we're doing a lot and we're getting results. An example, last year, we supported 15 agencies who were led by racially and ethnically diverse CEOs. Today, that number has grown to 37. We get results. So I could go on about our work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I'm going to leave that for another day. So today's conversation is one where everyone will find value and benefit. Today's focus, Hispanic Heritage Month. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Krystal Rodriguez, who is in talent acquisition with Battelle. Krystal, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Shane, for that kind introduction. As Shane has mentioned, my name is Krystal Rodriguez, and I am one of the talent acquisition coordinators at Battelle. I'm a proud Latina who was born and raised in Ohio, but don't let that fool you. I was brought up with a Puerto Rican family that knows how to get down in the kitchen. So I'm excited for the opportunity to be a part of this opportunity. I also want to thank United Way of Central Ohio for inviting myself and the panelists for this engagement series called Learn United, and speaking about Hispanic Heritage Month. For those of you who don't know, Learn United is a series of engagement conversations designed to highlight significant events in the community. So today we are thrilled to have the opportunity to have our three panelists, who I will introduce here shortly, as well as the opportunity to engage with the audience. So please, today, as we go through our Q&A, please feel free to use the chat, feel comfortable in asking any questions. We want to make sure that this is an engagement conversation for all. So without further ado, I would love to go ahead and introduce our three panelists. Our first panel guest speaker, Carolina Thatcher, Director of Diversity Inclusion, Ohio Bureau of Workers' Compensation. Thank you, Carolina, so much for joining us. Our next guest speaker that we have for our panel is Francisco Gomez-Bellenge, Associate to the Dean of the Ohio State University for the Fisher College of Business. Thank you, Francisco, for joining us as well.
Thank you.
And lastly, Val Gonzalez, a proud Nationwider, internal retirement specialist at Nationwide Insurance. Please give a round of applause for quickly and allowing us to introduce them. So thank you very much for all this today.
Thank you, Krystal.
With that said, we are excited and we want to go ahead and lean into our first question, if we could. So for the guest panel, the first question that I wanted to ask you guys, if you could, please share a little bit about the importance of Hispanic Heritage Month. What exactly does it celebrate and what happens during this month? Also, please share a little known fact about the month. So for whoever wants to take that first question, please go ahead.
I can take it first. Thank you, Krystal, for the introduction and for the invitation. I would like to say when the dates is between September 15 and October 15, and the reason why these dates are so it's because of the week of September 15 marks the independence of several Latin American countries, starting with Costa Rica, Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. They all have their independence on the 15th, and then Mexico, September 16, and Chile, which is the country I was born in, is September 18. So that marks the beginning of the celebration, and it ends, with around Columbus Day. So that it celebrates the histories, the contributions, but in my view, it makes the Hispanic population visible, at least during this month. We have this month that offers an opportunity to make the population visible within our organizations, within the community, and put this focus into what the contributions are and what this community does for the well-being of the whole state. If we're focusing on the state, there's a lot, that the community is doing. Community keeps growing. So I don't know, I started this, so I gave some of these snippets of information, but that's all I can tell right now. It's an opportunity. It's not just about the celebration of the culture, but it is also an opportunity to spotlight the community and make them visible.
Does anybody have anything to add to that?
Sure. So a couple of things. The Dia de la Raza, Columbus Day, is literally in English, it means the day of the race. And by race, what is meant is what really in the United States we used to call the melting pot. And it's sort of the pride of the melding of cultures, native indigenous cultures from the Americas, from Africa, from Europe, and from Asia. And so it's essentially that's what it means. And then in terms of a little known fact, Mexican Independence Day, September 16, there's a tradition that commemorates the September 16. September 16 is a little bit like the Declaration of Independence. It's not the day that independence was achieved, but it's sort of the day that it was sort of officially fought. And there was a priest called Father Hidalgo who basically went up to the bell tower of his church and basically started, proclaiming that Mexico should become independent from Spain. And so it's become a tradition on September 16th in the evening, in the midst of all the celebrations, for mayors to in front of a crowd, basically repeat some of the statements of Father Hidalgo, but without microphone, amplifiers, or anything. And so it's kind of a really cool thing to be part of, because that's actually quite emotional. And if you're a mayor, you're not used to doing that in public, it's like, too bad, it's part of your job duties.
And is that still carried on today?
Oh, yes.
Have you experienced it yourself?
Yes, actually, I experienced it in a borough of Mexico City. I could have gone to the Central Plaza with 1 million people, but I thought it'd be more interesting to do it in a smaller borough.
What is the attire? What does it look like? What do people wear? Is it
nothing special? And the mayor is just going to be dressed like it was a man. He was just dressed in a suit. It's just the tradition of basically saying it out loud without any kind of amplification.
That's amazing.
It's very short. It lasts, a minute.
I just, you think about sometimes in movies, how they bring things very elaborate. And so it's to see it and hear about it. It's interesting to really know, right? Hence why this is why the opportunity to speak about it, because what's reality versus what we see. So thank you, Francisco.
And it's called El Grito, which means the yell.
Oh, we'll have to check that out. Definitely. Anything add to that, Val?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the importance of Hispanic Heritage Month is that we're celebrating the contributions of Hispanics to the community, what we've done in the past, but also what we're going to do in the future as well. So we're celebrating our culture, we're celebrating our heritage, we're making ourselves visible, letting them know that we are here, and that we, even though it's America, we're still going to celebrate ourselves and contribute to the community as a whole. A little known fact that you asked for, I didn't realize this until the other day, but it was Hispanic Heritage Week originally in 1968 is when it started. It was until 1998 that it moved to a full month. So here we are 50 years later, still growing strong. We've come a long way in those 50 years, but we still have a long way to go. So happy to be a part of this so we can continue the push forward.
Agreed, couldn't agree more. Now, transition to something, how can people get involved with Hispanic Heritage Month? Who can they contact?
So I would say it depends on what kind of organization you are and what your goals are. If you're a social service organization, for example, one great place to start would be the Our Lady of Guadalupe Center, which is part of Catholic Social Services. Because they're a social service provider, so they're very plugged into that world. If you're corporate or business, you might want to connect with corporate associate resource groups like Val's at Nationwide, and there's a number of them. There's also Ohio Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, including the Columbus Hispanic Chamber. There's also 2 Latino business professionals groups in town, the Hispanic Columbus, of which I'm a founding board member, and Alpha Columbus. And then, there's also, for example, a great resource, the Ohio Commission on Latino Affairs, the Latina Mentoring Academy, of which a couple of you have been involved in. And then there's several dozen Hispanic Latinx student organizations at Ohio State that you could also connect with depending on your interests. So there's quite a few opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So Francisco, you mentioned you were a founder. Could you just explain a little bit more and how did you get engaged in Central Ohio, to give an example to our audience?
So I was approached by the person who was at that point the Chief Diversity Officer for Nationwide. They were interested in working with Prospanica to create a professional chapter of Prospanica in Columbus. So I met with a number of Nationwiders, and they and other contacts that I had, we created the chapter. I mean, I was already pretty involved in the community, and we had a lot of support from community organizations and definitely the corporate community too.
And I know, Val, you're part of Prospanica, I've heard. Is that correct?
I am. I believe you are as well, Krystal. But,
yes, I am.
I am the executive vice president. So if anybody's interested in Prospanica, we are a networking group here in Central Ohio. We have our local chapter, but we also have a national chapter as well. This week is actually our national conference, so we always do it during Hispanic Heritage Month. I've got to attend once in Orlando, and it was an awesome experience. We were supposed to go back to Orlando this year, but unfortunately due to COVID, we couldn't go. Vegas is another option soon, but yeah, definitely we do networking events as well as some professional development throughout the year. So definitely reach out to me if you're interested in that. Francisco had a pretty lengthy list that I had as well. But as far as Our Lady of Guadalupe Center, Ramona Reyes is a great contact. She's the director there. She's also a member of the Columbus City School Board. So if you want to get involved in the community, I would definitely reach out to her. One Francisco didn't mention was Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Central Ohio. Elizabeth Martinez is the CEO, and Rich Gandarias is a former Nationwider as well, who's done several different roles with them. So you could reach out to those two. With OCHLA, the Ohio Commission or Ohio Coalition for Hispanic and Latino Affairs, it's Lily Ann Kavanaugh. For Latino Mentoring Academy, I'm sure they could reach out to you, Krystal, or to Carolina as well. And then ways to get involved as well. Hispanic Restaurant Week is coming up at the end, October 11th through the 17th. It's a great opportunity to support some local restaurants that are owned by Hispanics. And then OCHLA is really pushing to vote. So National Voter Registration Day was actually, I think, 2 days ago, but you still have time. So we have a voice. Let's get together and share it. And lastly, then, we can always reach out through the United Way. Reach out to Shane. I'm sure he can contact you with some people as well.
Exactly.
I wanted to add, this is a great list that Francisco and Val have put together of, you know, places that you can get connected with. But I also want to call your attention to look internally within your organizations, because we all have employees who are contributing to the success and to the outcomes of the organizations that you work with or you lead. So look into your employees and reach out to them. You know, that they can get organized, you know, they can develop employee or business resource groups. They have connections to the community as well. The other, if you are a nonprofit organization, is to connect directly with the community and develop those relationships. It could start during Hispanic Heritage Month, but it can get expanded throughout the year. Building trust is really, really important for this community in both ways. One, if they are part of the service community that you have, but if they are part of the customer community that you have, they also bring a lot of loyalty as consumers of products and services. So developing those relationships with the community goes beyond what Hispanic Heritage Month is, but it's something we can all get engaged with.
And that's an important topic that you just talked about, the relationship, right? What we feel most comfortable with. So in my experience, when coming into the Central Ohio and trying to understand how can I get connected with it? People look like me. That's how I got started. I connected with people in my office who then spread me out to different people in the network where I could expand, and now being a part of Perspanica. So great advice all around. Thank you so much for providing that information for all of us to understand how we can get involved and make an impact. Now, wanted to just further and ask you guys, you know, can you just tell us about the Hispanic and Latinx community in Central Ohio? And then also, like, what's important to know and how can people learn from and support the community?
So in many ways, the Central Ohio Hispanic community reflects the Central Ohio population. So for example, Val came from, born in Northwest Ohio. I was born in Cleveland. Krystal, you come from Northeast Ohio. And so a good chunk of the Central Ohio Hispanic population basically comes from places where a lot of people in Central Ohio come from, which is basically the north of the state. The population of Ohio in general came about through several very distinct migration streams. So in Northwest Ohio, Hispanics came originally, mostly Mexican, as migrant workers, and then they basically stayed. And so that's pretty much all of Northwest Ohio: Alliance, Lima, Toledo. Cleveland and Lorain and Youngstown, people came to work in steel mills, mostly starting in World War II, to replace basically people who were going to fight in the war. And so the Northeast Ohio population tends to be a mixture of Puerto Rican and Mexican. And so again, that is reflected here in Central Ohio. And then we also have recent migrants from Latin America, all over Latin America, many from professional classes. We also have recent arrivals from professional classes that are hired by local large companies and organizations. And we also have another migration stream from mostly from Mexico, but also some from Central America. But our population is very dichotomous in terms of income and educational distribution. So there's quite a few people that are, working class, working in the construction restaurant industry, and then quite a few people in the professional class doing quite well, but not that many people in the middle. But again, the characteristic is we're very diverse. And a lot of us that come, for example, from Mexico or Central America, their native language is not Spanish. It's one of the many indigenous languages of the Americas.
Francisco, when you mentioned about the migration and because of the steel mills, that's how my family merged. My grandfather was from Puerto Rico, went to New York, traveled to Lorain, and then landed in Youngstown. that's where he founded our family, and we've grown ever since. So it is a very interesting how we all come together, and then we eventually end up here, right, in Central Ohio, and we learn about different backgrounds of each other.
I come from a foreign country, so I came through the immigration route as a student to Dayton first, and then to work in Columbus. So, and that's another university cities, communities also bring students, who come to get their degrees here. And yeah, so it's been central in Dayton and then Columbus. And there's diversity of, countries of origin within the student population, the foreign student population.
Now, Carolina, how was your experience in that from now and then hearing students now that are coming over and getting acclimated?
Well, I came in the year 2000 and I applied because you have to apply to the university from your country of origin. First, to get accepted, you have to pass a proficiency test and get some admission tests like the GRE and some others. And once you are accepted, you have to demonstrate that you can pay for the tuition. So all of that is before you even get a student visa. So it is a bit of a complicated route to come. And then once you get the visa to come to study, then there are restrictions on that visa. If you get a visa to work afterwards, then also there are some restrictions there. So I came in the year 2000. I got a work visa in 2003, got my green card in 2007, and became a citizen in 2016. So that was the extent of my immigration process, which is not different, from people from other countries like the Philippines and India, China. It takes a lot longer to get to a green card or citizenship.
Thank you for that. And Val, do you have anything that you would want for our audience to know that you can add to that?
I mean, for all sharing our stories, I'm originally from Defiance, Ohio, small town in the northwest corner of the state. My grandparents were migrant farmers from Mexico. They had gone back to Texas for the summer, the southern tip, for the winter. And then my grandfather came back up and got a job at General Motors. He got hired in and sent word back down to my grandma. She climbed in the back of a pickup truck, with my dad at 1 and my aunt at 3. And it took her a week in the early 50s. It's all dirt roads back then. There was no highways. And it took her a week to come all the way back up to Northwest Ohio to start a family. And, my uncle was born later. My dad was actually born at a migrant farm camp. And then my uncle was born in the hospital. But they had 3 kids, and then there was 8 grandkids. And now there's 6 college degrees out of those 8 grandkids. So we put down our roots, and my sister and I and my one cousin are here in Central Ohio. So we had definitely migrated down, but do have some families still back in Defiance, and some have moved to Cleveland as well. As far as the Latinx community in Central Ohio, one thing I didn't realize is that there's over 67,000 Latinx members here in Central Ohio. So we have a huge population. One thing I noticed online the other day is that Experience Columbus has a list of Hispanic-owned businesses that you can support. So if you want to go out and Google that, that's another thing you can do in Hispanic Heritage Month or throughout the entire year. It's maybe just a month, but we can support each other throughout the whole year as well.
That is so true. We definitely, when I go out, I definitely try to support those businesses, look for and try different cuisines, just because there's so much talent, there's so much to know about in Central Ohio. It's just the opportunity of just putting yourself out there in our community and to learn more, right? So I'm going to take a pause for a minute, and I want to see if anybody in our audience has any questions, any comments to add that you want to ask our panelists. We really want to make this engaging as possible. So if you have any other questions or wanted to add anything, please feel free to use the chat. And just not anything that our panelists want to add that we haven't mentioned today.
I wanted to add in regards to the population. So one characteristics that we can in general is that the population is growing. The Hispanic population is growing in Central Ohio at a much faster pace than the general population. So the source of growth in Central Ohio is both, you know, with the migration within the state, but also the Hispanic population. The population growth within the Hispanic population is more due to birth rates than it is migration or immigration rates. What else? The majority of Hispanic speak English and speak it well. However, there is a population, I found a number of people that speak English less than well is close to 90,000. And that 90,000 are customers of our organizations and are, you know, customers, whether they are service or they are recipients of service and benefits, but also customers. There is a whole population of people that can buy our services that is loyal with what, you know, their money and loyal to consumers, and we can reach out to them, but we have to make a conscious effort to get to them. Nationwide, there are 67 million Hispanics across the state. And this is a little known fact, but this is national. The population in Canada is 39 million. So there are more Latinos in the US than there are Canadians in Canada. So take that, you know, as a point to think about the impact and the, you know, of this population.
No, I was just curious, you know, I've heard in the past, you know, because the population is so large in the United States, do we feel like that will be our second language here soon? Have you heard of that before? I feel like that very well could be possible, you know, with a lot.
Well, that's already the case in certain parts of the country, like Texas, California.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a question about annual celebrations you participate in during this time of year, special dishes, visiting family. I don't celebrate any of those holidays because my father came from Spain, not from any Latin American country. In fact, those would be days of mournings when we lost all those countries that were our colonies. Just kidding. So not for me. And then Spanglish is basically talking in a mixture of both languages. And there's terms that even people who are completely fluent in Spanish, they will use English terms, but it's also very common for people to speak in sentences that are sort of half English and half Spanish. And if you speak both languages, it's perfectly normal and understandable. And if you're not fluent in both, it's totally confusing.
I know for myself, I am learning Spanish. Again, I grew up in Ohio, so I am learning Spanish. So that's why I like to immerse myself around my friends, so to learn from them and from the community myself. Val, do you want to take on this question as well? What is something that you participate during this time? Any special dishes or visiting family?
As far as visiting family, my dad's birthday is actually the week after it ends, October 23rd. So this year it's his 70th. We're going to go down to Fort Myers for a week and celebrate his birthday. So that'll be the family visiting part of it. As far as during the month, Nationwide always does a great job with our National Latino Alliance, which is our associate resource group. We do have different people across the country. So we have San Antonio and Des Moines are two other ones that are really big into it. And we do celebrations with them. So, you know, we celebrate our culture and our history and different kind of professional networking events as well in there. And Hispanic is also a part of that. So, you know, they're one of our, Nationwide's our biggest sponsor for Hispanic here in Central Ohio. So we always partner with them during that week. We usually have some type of networking event. Fortunately, we couldn't get it together this year because of COVID, but we're looking forward to doing that again, hopefully next year. And then special dishes. Not really. I just like going and trying new restaurants all the time. So I'm always looking to try a new Hispanic or owned restaurant, Latin restaurant. Not sure where I'm going to go during Hispanic or during restaurant week yet, but I'm sure I'll be definitely out there between the 11th and the 17th trying a few.
And do you know any of the restaurants that are on that list?
The only one I can think of offhand is probably Palmas. Is that right? With Omar owns. But I'm sure I imagine Los Guachos will be on there as well. They're supposed to have the best tacos in town, but haven't had a chance to try them yet. So we'll find out.
Somebody said Sidebar, so check that one out as well. So.
Oh yeah, that was on the list that I saw in Experience Columbus.
Yeah, I agree. Sidebar is amazing. Yeah, Sidebar is owned by Chileans. And what did I do during this month, in addition to what we do at work? You know, this year we are launching an employee resource group based on, you know, Hispanic identity. We let them get organized. We approved the charter, so they're launching called Nuestra Mesa, as an, you know, it's an invitation for people to join our table. The September 18 is Independence Day in Chile, and I'm really closely connected with my family over there. So we make our dishes, our empanadas and our, you know, barbecue as part of the tradition that we do during 18, which is the 18th of September. And that's, you know, about that. But, you know, visiting, there are restaurants from all Latin American countries you can find. There are Guatemalan restaurants, there are Peruvian and Ecuadorian restaurants. There is Brazilians, you know, Brazilian is not Hispanic American, but there are Latinos. There are restaurants owned by Brazilians up there around Cleveland Avenue. Argentinian, there's another that opened not long ago here in you know, around Hilliard, Dublin area. So yeah, look for and take this time to taste new foods, new recipes, download recipes, you know, that is something fun that we can all do.
And speaking of food, I'm just curious to ask the panel, since we are all talking about food, what is like your go-to dish or family that has during the holidays that you have to have on your table, and why?
Nothing in particular for me.
Yeah. Empanadas has become the most sought after. You know, I married an American, born and raised here in Central Ohio, and I have stepchildren that have Japanese. So we have a diverse family group. You know, the nuclear family is diverse, but they all love the empanadas. And it's every country has a different recipe for empanadas. So our empanadas, you can have a competition. Everybody will vote for their own. And I love Chilean empanadas. So that is a must have on family gatherings.
The tamales for me. So every year at Christmas, my dad's childhood friend, she takes orders. She makes them out of her own kitchen. So we always make sure he goes and talks to her and gets a couple dozen, and then Christmas morning we always, you know, throw them in the oven, heat them up a little bit, and that's always breakfast Christmas morning for us.
I approve.
And I say all this, right, because everybody's Thanksgiving table, for example, that's going to be the next, you know, minus Halloween, we all talk about it right in the office, and so it's a great conversation topic. And so I remember going and moving here, and I was so excited because I said, I'm having red rice and gandules. You know, that is a staple in my family, as well as pork. And I just remember they're like, are you not going to have mashed potatoes? And we're like, no, we are. But it's just the conversation topic and how we bring everybody together, right? So that's why I ask all this. Food, like Charles said, food brings everyone together. Exactly. I just wanted to say, you know, real quickly, is there anything that you guys haven't, that I haven't asked that you want the audience to know?
So at the risk of sounding heretical, the whole concept of Hispanic or Latinx identity is somewhat controversial, because a lot of, once you get outside of the diversity and inclusion bubble and you talk to like ordinary people, most Hispanic or Latinx people in the United States identify primarily with their country of origin. So I'm Puerto Rican, not Hispanic. I'm Mexican, not Hispanic. I'm Spanish, not Hispanic. And so to some extent, this is something, a concept that was created. It's a relatively modern concept. Americans really love to classify people. And that's actually one of the reasons why you don't have these strong local or national organizations around that identity, because to a large extent, it isn't a strongly shared or strongly held identity. I mean, obviously there's similarities, there's, common language, common history. There's definitely some cultural similarities. But for example, the food of Puerto Rico or the Caribbean in general is very different from the food of Mexico. Frankly, it's closer to the food from Spain. And there's very, very large internal differences. And so sometimes I think the concept gets pushed a little bit too far. Another thing is that Hispanics tend to be very underrepresented in the media. 5 to 6% of main cast members in TVs and film versus more than 18% of the population. 11% of journalists, most of which are in Spanish language media. So I'll stop with that.
I want to pick up that point that you are talking about, Francisco, because locally also, Hispanic tend to be underrepresented in boards of organization and nonprofit corporate world, and tend to be underrepresented in leadership positions in the public, private, and nonprofit organizations. So one thing, and this is, it comes, actually, I had it as a bullet point in what I wanted to talk about, So one thing is during Hispanic Heritage Month, celebrate the cultures, celebrate traditions, learning about the community is one thing, but also is taking it beyond that and making it part of how you do business. How are we making our organizations more diverse? How are we reaching out to customers? Because if we're not looking, the population is invisible. And I remember clearly, because I come from the nonprofit world, we were trying to reach the community, and I often heard, we don't see any Latinos, there are no Hispanics here. And it just takes building relationship with one, and it begins to expand. And then you see them, and you see that they're not visible because we're not serving, and they're not visible because they don't exist. They exist, but we're not necessarily serving them because we're not being, reaching out. Also, if including them in positions or boards, make it count, so it's not just a representation issue, but it is being really at the table. That is a message that I want to bring, because it's not just about the celebration, it is also about how do we make service really reach into the diversity of the population that we all serve. And that, examine also LinkedIn accounts. When I did mine, because, we all have our biases, I realized that my LinkedIn account is a lot of people from Latin American origins, I'm a volunteer at the Latina Mentoring Academy, and a lot of those connections come from there. I've attended some meetings with Prospanica, but we all have to, diversify of our professional connections as well, so we can expand our reach in the businesses that we do.
Yeah, I would add, to extend on Carolina's excellent point, is that very often targeted outreach to diverse communities does not involve targeted outreach to Hispanic or Latinx communities.
And And what I was going to add, and that's where you can circle back and look at all the lists that we have that you can get involved, right? That's how this all ties into play. Just meeting one person and growing your network and really being meaningful in what you decide and how to grow your network is very important.
And we all have a huge resource in the employees that are part of our organizations. Sometimes, there are resources untapped within our own organization. So that's a great point to start.
Very true. It is a great point to start. When I started my career, that's where I tapped, where I felt most comfortable. And then I pushed myself to get out of my comfort zone and join other organizations. Val, how did you tap into the Central Ohio community? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Mainly through Prospanica. I got involved. I went to a few meetings. JJ Perez was here at Nationwide, and he was also a founding member with Francisco of the organization. So I went to a few, and then Francisco and Juan, who was also on the board, reached out to me and asked me to be part of the board, and I ran, and I'm on the board now. So that's one way I've done it. I've also been on the National Latino Alliance board here in Columbus through Nationwide, our associate resource group. So I've done a lot through that as well. And then there's volunteering opportunities. Volunteered at Festival Latino before with Nationwide as well. So, Carolina and Francisco are both right. You got to get involved. You got to get out there, put yourself out there and help out. And, don't be afraid to speak up and share your opinion.
Thank you all so much. I greatly appreciate all the insight that you have today, how to get involved in Hispanic Heritage Month. We want to just ask one more time if the audience had any other questions for our panelists before we close out today's session and engagement. We have one question. It says, can you explain the difference between Hispanic and Latin American? I think a lot of Americans are unclear on that.
So I can take a stab at it. The short answer is I can't explain it because the categories, people get very passionate about that. Like Hispanic is one thing and Latinx is another thing. So there's a difference between Latin and Latin American. Latin American is very simple. It's people who come from one of the countries of Latin America, which would include Brazil, for example. Hispanic is a category that essentially became officially adopted by the US Census Bureau and hence by the federal government. And so official government statistics always use the term Hispanic. Hispanic refers to the Latin word for the Iberian Peninsula, Hispania with an H, that is today's Portugal and Spain. So it would be people who came from there, but then came to Latin America. So a lot of people don't reject the term. A lot of Latino people reject the term because they consider it sort of official and sort of externally imposed. The term Latino, again, comes from Latin, but obviously there's lots of people of Latin origin that are not Latino, like French, Italians, Romanians, and so on. So again, it would refer to people of Latin origin, specifically from Spain and Portugal. Since Latino is a gendered term, Latino really means male Latino. A lot of people prefer the term Latinx, which is gender neutral, but that's a very anglicization of a term that's Spanish. But frankly, it's seldom known or used outside academic and DEI communities, the term Latinx. So that's my take on it.
When in doubt, ask people how they identify. If, it's better if someone identifies as Hispanic or Latino, that's the preferred term. Some also use the / Hispanic Latino or Hispanic Latinx. But I completely agree with Francisco and his the stab on the concept. It gets complicated, and we DEI professionals sort of tend to make things complicated.
It's definitely a conversation piece. You know, I do, being a younger generation myself, I do see the conversations that they talk about on the social media and the feeds that people identify. And to your point, it's a preference. It's what you want to be identified as. You just have to ask.
I'll give another example. If you come from Nigeria and you're walking down the street in the United States, people are going to think of you, oh, you're Black. And that would be the same as African American, right? Well, if you're Nigerian, no, I'm not Black. I mean, Black is a kind of a weird thing because in Africa, everybody like me. I'm not African American. I was born in Nigeria. I'm Nigerian. Now, 2 or 3 generations later, their kids are going to be African American. But I mean, it's again that thing, the idea that the concept sometimes is imposed on people as opposed to them adopting it.
The other is, you know, I watch, I'm into genealogy and things, you know, and since the genetic tests started becoming popular, people often get surprised when their racial description does not say Latin American. So a point of clarification in here is that Hispanic, Latino, Latinx is an ethnic category that is separate from race, because Latinos are also from many different races. There are, you know, native indigenous, you know, to the continent. There are whites, you know, coming from Europe. There's a mix. There are the people that came through the slave trade also. And in countries like, for example, in Brazil and in Peru, there are huge Asian communities as well, that they all identify as Latinos, but are from all different racial groups. So that's the other thing. So in census and in some classifications or connections, you know, they're going to ask you race, but in separate, they're going to ask you if you're Hispanic or Latino. So because it can be from all different races.
Right, that's an excellent point. So for example, if you are Tohono O'odham, Native American from Arizona, in the United States, you would be considered Native American. Your cousin that lives like literally across the border, like you share a backyard, they're considered Mexican or Latinx or Hispanic. And they're also Tohono O'odham ethnically. If you are of Japanese descent, but you're Peruvian, and you come here, you're considered Latinx, although when people look at you, they're going to assume you're Asian, but culturally, you're Hispanic. So it gets complicated.
Thank you so much for explaining that, Carolina and Francisco. We really appreciate that. Anything else that we want to add before we do wrap up? We just want to make sure that we want to thank everybody for joining. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to put it in the chat. But I just want to thank everybody in the audience and our 3 panelists again for your participation and this engaging conversation. I just also want to say thank you to Unite Way for bringing these conversations to the community. We hope that you will continue to join United Way for further conversations, as well as you could also learn more about the Live United at centralohio.org/events, because our community is stronger when we show up together, united. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your participation, your questions. This is a great conversation to really talk about Hispanic Heritage Month. So thank you to the 3 of you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Krystal.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.